Hey friend, it's me Vasco with a quick announcement. We at the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast are organizing this year's Scrum Master Summit. For tickets and details on the summit, check out the URL bit.ly/SM Summit 22. All one word, SMSUMMIT 22. And now, on to the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday this week with Steen Villumsen. Hi, Steen. Welcome back.
Hey, Vasco. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So today's Tuesday, and we explore teams, their own journey, like we were talking about yesterday, the team's journey, not our journey with the team. And of course, we'll explore how they sometimes become their own worst enemies. But before we dive into that, on Tuesdays, we also talk about books. And we want to have a book, Steen, that inspired you as a Scrum Master, that maybe even changed your perspective on what the Scrum Master role would be. So what's that book?
I don't think it's an obvious choice I'm proposing here, but the one that first came to my mind when being asked this question was actually a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And I don't know how familiar anyone is with that book. It's really a book around personal efficiency. But what really resonates me with that book is that it underlines the fact that you need to have a system that you trust, basically. So it explores different methodologies in terms of working more efficiently and how to prioritize what kind of reflections to have on the more short-term horizon, but also on in a life perspective actually. But the fact that you need a system you can trust really resonates with me, because that's what you need to set up for yourself as a Scrum Master or as any individual, basically, to be efficient at what you do, and to make I would say cognitive breathing space to take in all those impressions and possibilities that comes at you. So that's at least a recommendation from my side, is Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Absolutely. Great book. I read it many, many years ago. A lot of the things I do today were inspired by the Getting Things Done method. Some of the tools I ended up using were developed by people who actually read the book and started to develop software tools based on that, for example. One of the things that I remember from that book, which you already alluded to, is the need to create a system that clears our mind, right? I remember a phrase, a human mind is not made to keep information in. That's what paper and other systems are for. A human mind is made to react, to analyze and translate and so on. For me, this is very important, because one of the things that we do as Scrum Masters is really observe. And very many of our guests, I imagine you do too, have a backlog of things that they could focus on, right? The options of where to focus. And as we observe, we write those down, right? But then we need to have a system to kind of filter through those and say, okay, so what do I focus on this week or this month, and of course also today? And I think that the Getting Things Done method can be, for those of you who don't yet have a system, can be really useful to make that transition from all of the stimuli that you get by observing and being in conversations and so on, and translating that into very concrete, actionable things, which is at the end of the day what we are trying to help teams to do as well.
Absolutely. And what you say right now, Vasco, inspires me to, I think there's another, I think it's from karate, but also mentioned in the book, mind like water concept, right? And that's really, I think, is super important for a Scrum Master, is, the availability to take anything in. So you have maybe I'm sounding like a Star Wars here, right? But you have a calm mind, so you are able to appreciate whatever comes at you. And it could be, specific tasks that needs to be doing, or it could be a concerned team member or anyone else, really, right? So so having that excess bandwidth to take that in once it offers itself, I think is super important.
Thank you for the inspiring recommendation. Absolutely. I think this is the first time that GTD, or Getting Things Done, is mentioned here on the podcast. But as you very well explained, it's a necessity for us as Scrum Masters, because it enables us to do the other parts of our job that are requiring a lot more cognitive load, which is a term that people will read a lot about in that book as well. Stan, so now we turn our attention to teams and how sometimes they become their own worst enemies. And of course, we don't do this just because we like to talk about problems, but rather to allow us to recognize those patterns if they should ever come to pass in the teams we work with. So walk us through the steps, like how were the first conversations that in hindsight tell you that a certain pattern or behavior was developing in the team that later on led to problems?
This reminds me of a particular time with a particular also IT product team who was still fairly new to the agile ways of working, and so was our surroundings for that matter. Building very much on what we talked about yesterday. So this product team really wanted to do, we were doing Scrum at that time, to do Scrum by the book, right? And we knew we had to do what the product owner said because it was that person who had the vision and the ambition with our product, right? It was that person who were in contact with customers, both existing and potential, and so on. But it was also at a time where a different organizational structure was tested out, you could call it. So there was the product owner, as it often is, wasn't the line manager of the development team, and there were also enterprise architects and a lot of other good people with good input there. And at some point, I could just feel especially our sprint plannings going in so many directions. So we talked about, you could almost sense it every time we switch from one user story to the next. And it was the same for our refinement session, right? You could just feel that your mind was it had to do an enormous shift in context because now we were, going from a specific customer-facing feature. We were now talking about something, super technical within the product itself, or we were talking about reporting to upper management. So every time it felt like an enormous context switch every time we switched from having a conversation on one user story to another. I was about to say ashamed. I was very sorry about we had that going on for so long because it just felt like, there was the team and around us were standing all these different people sort of screaming priorities at us. And at some point, it didn't tear the team apart, but we definitely lost our way.
You talked about the team discussing features that were going in many directions. I'm guessing, you said technical, reporting, and so on, customer facing. I'm guessing that they represented perhaps conflicting visions of where the product should go. I don't know if that's what you meant, but that's how I read it. How did you go from there to not knowing what the priorities are? Like, what were the steps that eventually led to that confusion in priorities?
It's a good question. I would say that we were coming back to the book, maybe Getting Things Done. It speaks of having as few inboxes as you're able to set up around yourself, right? And I think that was where we allowed ourselves to have, multiple inboxes. So it was no longer the product owner that was sort of the funnel or the gatekeeper for us, and ensuring that consistency in the direction both of the team itself, but also on the product we were developing. So we were sort of opening up for more people to provide that input, and we really weren't sort of filtering it or being asking questions around whether we were sort of diluting our focus.
If I translate it in my mind, it would be something like we weren't getting stories only from the product owner anymore. There were other stakeholders and perhaps even team members that were kind of pushing stuff onto the sprint. Is that what was happening?
That was what was happening from a practical standpoint. And I think what also was happening was that we really didn't stop and assess, because we're a bunch of nice guys, right? So we want to please as many stakeholders as we possibly can. But we really didn't sort of, stopped and said, okay, so we know this is a good idea, but is it actually in line with the direction or the vision of where we want to go as a team or for the product that we are building?
So as Scrum Masters, I'm sure we will, at least sometimes in some organizations, quite many times, face this kind of anti-pattern. What's the advice you have for our Scrum Master friend out there, Luke, probably right now dealing with a similar situation?
If I were to boil it down, I would say, remember that you are never just the Scrum Master of the team or the coach of the team. You are expected to coach in every direction. So that also means bringing in the product owner for a one-to-one, coaching him or her in what's in sharing your thinking and where you think things need to go. It's also in terms of the line managers and the organization around you. I would actually argue that as a Scrum Master, you can have the development team up and running fairly quickly, and you would need to spend the majority of your time coaching outside the team.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, and one that we kind of make quite often here on the podcast. We talk about product owners on Friday, as we will this week as well. And we built a course, the Coach Your Product Owner course. I'll put the link on the show notes. But the key thing here is to take in exactly what you said, Stan, which is that we don't just coach the team. We coach everybody that is required for the team to succeed. And as we will talk about on Friday, the product owner is a key partner for the Scrum Master to help the team succeed, right? Like if we have a good relationship with the PO and we can have those one-on-one conversations, as you mentioned, we can help them, right? Like, of course, they need to want to be helped. That's clear, right? That's what coaching means. But we can do that. We can help them, and we can bring knowledge and tools and approaches and facilitation in order to get there. But we need to prepare to coach, in this case, the product owner, but of course also, as you said, the rest of the organization.
Absolutely. I think my approach to it is always thinking, where would my coaching have the biggest impact today, right? So it might not be facilitating a retrospective for the product team. It might be engaging with the product owner or their manager or someone else, which in the end will be beneficial to the team as well.
That's a great question for our own self-reflection as Scrum Master. So everybody write that down. Where would my coaching have the biggest impact today? That was a great question. Thank you for that, Stan.
You bet.
Hey friends, it's Vasco again, now with a bit longer announcement. I'm part of the team that is behind the Global Scrum Master Summit, the conference dedicated to the Scrum Master role. If you're a Scrum Master, the Scrum Master Summit is the place to learn, to share, and of course to meet new friends. We will have lots of live sessions where you can meet and network with other Scrum Masters from the whole globe. So make sure you check it at bit.ly/SM Summit 22. We have several amazing keynotes and 7 tracks that feature people like you and of course thought leaders sharing their insights, their knowledge, and helping you become an awesome Scrum Master. You can check out all of the details of the summit, including the keynotes announced, the track chairs, and much more at bit.ly/SM Summit 22. That's all one word. That's bit.ly/SM SUMMIT and the numeral 22. I'll see you on the conference floor.